Hi there, it's Riley at No Fun Club. So we were doing some experiments the other day with stereo mic setups, and I thought it would be a cool idea to just leave some set up so we could do a little demonstration video. We're not going to go into a ton of detail of every polar pattern or mic placement, but we just want to give some examples and do a little overview so you can hear what they sound like, and I'll also give my opinion on what I might use for what purpose. So let's do it. Okay, so here's an overview of the mics that we'll be using today. We have these Coles 4038 microphones in a Bloomline pair. In a Bloomline pair, you have two figure of 8 mics placed directly over top of each other in an X. Usually with this type of pickup pattern, neither of the mics will be facing directly at the source. And the two mics are picking up pretty different stuff, so you get a wide stereo image. The next stereo pair is these Sheps CMC6s with MK4 cardioid capsules. They're on a stereo bar in an XY configuration. So with XY, you want the capsules as close as possible and faced across from each other like one side of an X. The two microphones will be picking up a lot of the same information, so there is a good amount of mono compatibility here. Now the third stereo mic setup we have today is a stereo microphone, so it's two capsules in one housing. It's a USM69 by Neumann. This microphone is going to be used as a mid-side pair. So in a mid-side configuration, your mid channel is a cardioid pattern mic pointed at the source, and 90 degrees from that is the figure of 8, which picks up the side channel or the stereo information. The polar patterns can be changed on this mic. Now, to use this technique correctly, you need to do what's called mid-side encoding. I put the way to do the encoding on the side of this diagram on screen, but I'm going to run down how I'm doing it on the Neve console. So I have my mid channel and my side channel. This side channel is being sent out to a mult, and then the mult is being sent to the line inputs of channel 13 and 14. That's where I'm doing the encoding. So these two channels are set to the same volume, and they're both hard panned. One of them has its polarity inverted, and you can see I'm monitoring those. So when I move the volume on my side channel here, it's not monitored, but it goes to these two tracks, which are. There are lots of videos online that already go into more depth about mid-side processing, so I didn't want to cover it too extensively here, but if people are interested, I could do a whole video on it. Just let me know in the comments. The last stereo mic setup we have here is what's known as a spaced pair. In contrast to the other three options, a spaced pair doesn't sound that much like what your ears will actually hear, because the two microphone capsules are placed apart from each other. So unless you have a massive head, it's not going to be possible for you to hear this in real life. It's common to use a spaced pair fairly close together as drum overheads or for a piano, but in these cases we're going to be using them as room ambience mics. They can get a very pronounced stereo image because you can just place them across the room. So ours are just going to be on either side of the room here. So the first thing we're going to demonstrate is this piano being recorded here. So here's our piano that we recorded. This is the Coles, the Bloomline pair. This is the XY, the two Sheps on the stereo bar. This is the mid, which is the side of the Neumann stereo mic capsule that's faced at the piano. This is the side, just the side. And if you remember from before, this track is sending to a stereo pair of channels that's doing the encoding. So when I turn this up and down, we're just hearing stereo information. If you listen to this in mono, it'll completely cancel out. Here's our space pair. So we probably need to change up the music. I think Domo knows what to do. So the Coles compared to the XY, you can hear that the XY is a lot more mono. The Coles has a little more noise, but it's very full and stereo because the mics are really pointed far apart. It really sounds quite good. The mid side is quite a bit brighter, I think partially because that mic was higher up physically in the room, and that mic's pretty bright. It is really fun to be able to adjust mono and stereo independently. And here's the space pair. The space pair is also very stereo compared to that to the XY. And these are the same mics. These are both Sheps. These are the ones on the stereo bar, and these are the ones across the room from each other. As compared with the Bloomline pair, I noticed that the space pair is also very stereo. I think because the Bloomline mics are in the same physical space in the room, they're very stereo, but they still feel really tight. Whereas the space pair, they feel more separated. You'd probably want some closer mics on the piano in most music situations, but I think for a stereo sound, any of these could work depending what you're looking for. So here's Domo improvising a slower piano part, and I'm going to talk less and let the mics do the talking here. The space pair has a nice warm sound because of the placement in the room. I tried to put these microphone bodies as close in the room as they could go together, but they all sound pretty different because they can't literally occupy the same space. It's good to keep that in mind because even moving a microphone half a foot or a couple inches can have a massive impact on how it sounds. So what you can mostly judge from these is the stereo information, the stereo spread. You could probably get a similar tonal balance from any of these mics just by placing them or EQing them differently. Okay. Now we're going to shift these same mic setups around and demonstrate recording drums. So here's our drums. If you listen really carefully, you can hear that the Coles is picking up a tiny bit of low frequency rumbling from the mic moving because of the drums. You could deal with this with filtering or moving the mic. This is a bit of a downside with the Coles 4038s. They have really high handling noise if the mic gets moved or the mic stand gets moved. And they also don't handle sound pressure levels well. But they sound really nice and warm. As with the piano, the XY has a much more of a mono, close together sound. The Bloom line sounds really nice and wide and warm. And obviously this has a lot to do with the Coles. They're a very warm sounding mic. They're a very popular choice as a Bloom line pair. I normally wouldn't use this Neumann stereo mic on drums because for me, I find it's a little too bright for what I'm looking for most of the time. But it is really cool to have this side channel for a drum room mic. Very useful in mixing. Using this technique, you have a lot of control over what the room mic gives you. So you can blend it in differently depending what other mics you have on the drums. I use a space pair as a room miking technique a lot, and I've seen a lot of other engineers do that as well. But it really does sound more effecty and wide. The Bloom line pair has a more focused sound while still being really stereo. In our last drum example, the mid channel is a different cardioid pattern now. Still pointed at the drums. The side is exactly the same, but the mid will sound a little different. And the XY, I've pointed them out and away from each other. So you can hear they're a little wider now. So I'm going to talk less again and just let you hear the mics. But do check this out, the XY versus the space pair. Because remember, those are the exact same mic. The mid channel does sound a little bit more roomy and ambient now. If you wanted to have your mid channel be fairly ambient, you could actually use it as an omni as well, instead of some type of cardioid. So for me, I find I usually like a space pair or a Bloom line pair on drum rooms. I think the mid side does something really interesting here too. Nowadays, there's lots of plugins that let you easily adjust the mid and side channels independently in the box on any stereo source, but I'd like to experiment more myself with mid-side miking in the future, because I think it's a really cool technique. I do think that for drum rooms, the spaced pair and the Bloom line pair give you something pretty special. And lots of people love using mid-side on drum rooms. For me personally, I find that the XY's too mono for what I'd be looking for from a room mic on drums, but there's lots of other things I would use that on, like perhaps right over top of a piano or in front of an acoustic guitar. Well, that's all for this video. Hopefully it was informative and interesting, possibly entertaining. We'll be back. Please leave comments if you can about what you liked about the video or what you'd like us to do a video about or what you didn't like about the video. And if you have time, please do subscribe and we'll send more videos your way. Goodbye.